So the city of Winnipeg, one step closer to reducing speed limit in residential areas as well as some other parts of the city from 50 to 40. And just to remind our audience that even though they're one step closer, they need the province's help to do this because there needs to be changes to the Highway Traffic Act, and you're shaking your head no.
No, they can do it on their own.
Okay.
But the issue here is an interesting one because I think you'll probably have Winnipeggers and Manitobans on different sides of it. I can tell you my neighbor would probably welcome this change. He'd probably like it. And I could tell you that my brother-in-law probably wouldn't. He probably wouldn't like this change. So the thing with the city is they have the ability to make this change on their own. And if we as the province act, we would be changing it for every community in Manitoba. So not just the cities like Brandon and Dauphin, but small towns across the province as well too. So again, I respect the fact that there's a lot of different opinions on this, and we're going to keep working on making communities safer with the tools at the provincial level and working with municipalities on the tools that they have too.
I know you said that if the Highway Traffic Act was changed by the province itself, it would affect other communities outside of Winnipeg. Have there been other communities that have said something or reached out looking to lower their speed limits? I know a lot of people talking about safety in different communities.
I would say that there have been, but it's different from what the city is proposing, or at least some people at the city are proposing here. What we typically hear about are rural municipalities that are along highways where the speed limit is 100, 90, things like that. And they would say, like, as it goes through our small town, can we see that 60? 70, something like that. So it's a little bit of a different situation that we're hearing about from rural Manitoba.
Okay. I want to move on now because yesterday you announced the 72-hour detox center has started accepting people on meth. I know that it's still fairly new, but I want to ask you, how's it going? And do you really think that the average Winnipegger is going to see a difference out there on our streets?
Yeah, I think so. That's the main reason why we're doing it. Right now, the police do really important work. Our healthcare workers do really important work. And when somebody is in the grips of meth psychosis, it makes all of their jobs more difficult. It might mean a police officer having to stay with somebody for potentially an entire shift or longer. It could mean a healthcare worker in a waiting room, their safety in question or other complications. So having the ability to take somebody from a waiting room or from a street corner before they cause chaos or harm other people, I think is a really, really important step. We're also taking this from a healthcare perspective. So part of the reason why we passed the law to make this possible last year, but we're only opening the facility now, is because we've been listening to the physicians with the expertise in addictions and mental health, and basically making sure that the highest quality of medical and health supervision will be there at this facility, so that while we're trying to keep the community safe, we're also keeping this person who's struggling with addiction safe as well.
It's a very delicate balance, having to keep someone for 72 hours against their will. I mean, that is 3 days when you think about it. How are you going to make sure that this facility doesn't do harm in the community? And some people might say this might stigmatize drug use and addiction.
Well, the stigma's already there. I mean, if you're driving to work and you see somebody swinging their fists at nobody, like what is happening? You're creating a stigma for our province and for how we feel about our own personal safety. So I respect the fact that people want this protective care center to have high quality interventions that are going to look after the person with addictions. But I would just remind folks, we can't separate what's happening to that individual with what's happening to our broader community. And right now, going back to the past decade or however long meth has really been that really prominent public health issue, we haven't been doing a service to the broader community. And so this is about bringing that back into balance and saying, you know what, if somebody's out there screaming on a street corner, we're going to go ahead and we're going to just take them off the street until they calm down, so that the person waiting at the bus stop, or, you know, your grandparent who's just trying to walk to the grocery store, or your kid who's walking home from school, is not going to have to worry about their personal safety. So all these things are complicated questions for sure, but we can't deal with it in a vacuum. We always have to be balancing respect for the individual's health and rights and freedoms while respecting the responsibility that we have to the safety and the rights and freedoms of everyone else in our society.
I want to move on now to something that is a talker, and that is BC. I know that you've talked about this earlier this week about
is this,
BC.
The time change?
We
sure is a talker.
Yeah, we had a call-in yesterday on noon, and it was split. We had a lot of people that were saying yay or nay when it comes to the time change. I know that you've said that Manitoba is not looking at this, but would you reconsider? I mean, BC did go to residents and ask them, and it appeared that overwhelmingly people had said, let's just keep the clocks where they are.
Well, I mean, I think it's something that I respect. Listen, everybody has their complaints to make when the clocks spring forward. A little bit less when we gain the hour of sleep later in the year. I think people enjoy that a bit more. But I think it's more the disruption for parents, right? Like, especially if your kid, their sleeping pattern's going to be thrown off. That's a big deal. And hey, listen, we've got an early U9 hockey practice on Sunday morning, so our family's going to be right in there with the midst of everyone else. But it's just more a question from my perspective of like, we have these really urgent issues in the healthcare system that we're trying to address. We're trying to do some great things in the budget to help you with the cost of groceries. And so I want our focus to be on issues like healthcare, like groceries. Again, I recognize that the daylight savings time question is people think about it. People talk about it. It's an important issue. But if we all of a sudden decide to do the consultation and the legislative change, it's going to pull our attention away from emergency rooms. It's going to pull our attention away from the cost of living. So not that it's not an important priority. It is when we're talking about sleep and being able to raise your family well. That is a very important priority. But I just think we've been elected on a mandate to deliver on healthcare and affordability. And so we're just going to try and stay locked in on that for now.
I want to talk about affordability because you just touched it on right there. Budget day, March 24th, that's coming up. School budgets. Many school divisions here in Manitoba drafting or have finalized their budgets for the next school year. We saw that the Winnipeg School Division approved a 9.3% property tax increase. Brandon was looking at an increase of over 7%. Hanover approved a tax increase of 7% as well. Your government announced close to $80 million in new funding. But school divisions say that they're still feeling the financial crunch and now have to look to the taxpayer to help meet those shortfalls. What else can your government do to help these divisions to prevent them from passing it down year after year to the taxpayer?
Well, I think there's a few things I'd want to say. First of all, I respect the work that school divisions do and the trustees. And part of that goes back to Bill 64. So if your listeners would remember, fighting against Bill 64 was something that our team really leaned into alongside school divisions, alongside parents. And it was part of what led to Brian Pallister being chased out of office by turncoats in his own party. But Bill 64 was about centralizing power in the provincial government. And we said, you know what, that's not right. We want local control. So I do respect the important work that school divisions do. But now, since there's been this public outpouring saying we want local control over education, our role as a province is to say, listen, we're going to give you a 3.5% increase in funding, which is higher than inflation, right? And is dealing with a growing population in Manitoba as well. And at the individual school division level, they are making decisions about adding services, about staffing. They're making decisions about what they want to invest those resources in. So I think that part of this era that we're in right now is about saying, okay, we took a stand, we fought for local control, and now let's make sure that school divisions are being very transparent with the ratepayers and the parents and the students about, yeah, we are going to be asking you to contribute this, but in exchange, you're going to be getting these services that we've decided are important for the local area. The second thing that I would say is that if you look at Alberta right now, their provincial government has raised education property taxes, Danielle Smith, right? 21% province-wide, centrally. So again, when we look across the board at what's happening in other regions, hopefully we're going to be finding a way to help in our budget this year that makes sure that there's enough funding for education. Because again, the alternative to what you're talking about here means less teachers, less EAs, less support for kids to have recreation and outdoor activities and stuff like that. finding a balance between that and then the cost of living. I don't want to see people pay higher taxes. So I think we're going to have some help in the budget on the education property tax front. And we might be asking the top 1% to help us out with that.
Because, 9% is obviously not cheap. I mean, but 7% is a big, increase for families that,
everything right now,
everything is big.
Like groceries, rent. And so like any sort of increase is a big deal for somebody who's struggling to get by. I totally agree.
The previous PC government compelled school divisions to kind of limit that property tax increase.
But that results in a cut to education. What you're saying there, if you strip away the PC party lingo, is less funding for school divisions. That's what it means at the end of the day. I don't want to be the premier that's taking money away from kids to learn. So what we're trying to do instead of the PC cuts is we're trying to find a fair way to make sure that schools have enough support for our kids in the classroom. We know that there's more need than ever. Teachers are being asked to do more. I think we have a better understanding of mental health in children. And then as a result, that calls on us to invest more in our kids. So now's the time to invest in the future, but it's also the time for us to balance that with the affordability thing. So our budget is going to try and make sure that we got enough resources for schools, but also that we're helping you out with your property taxes.
I want to ask you about meeting Federal Industry Minister Melanie Joly earlier this week. Can you say at all what was discussed between you and the minister? She did, mention Port of Churchill and the importance of it as a federal project. But what can you tell us about your meeting with Joly earlier this week?
Melanie Joly's great, and I think she's a great friend to Manitoba too. In addition to Churchill, which I hope folks recognize, not only is this a great project for our province, but it's a great project for our country. And so I think the federal government is really keying into that, and they're starting to lean in. In fact, I know that the federal government has decided to lean in to Churchill, so now we're working together on that. That's really exciting. But Minister Joly was also saying, as one of the economic ministers, they're really looking at defense spending, and defense spending is going to be one of the big ways that they promote our economy. I think her message effectively here in Manitoba was, Manitoba businesses, Manitoba workers, let's figure out a way for you to pivot towards defense, and then therefore you can bring more resources and more opportunity into Manitoba. So whether it's aerospace as one of the big opportunities that we have here or other sectors, I just think that she had a really encouraging message for Manitobans to let's work together to meet this moment that we're in for our country.
Because it's still, the federal government still hasn't been listed as one of the major projects in the national...
Is that what you said on the radio?
Well, I mean,
what did you say?
She said that it's an important project for sure, but it hasn't been named as one of...
But none have.
Okay.
No projects across Canada have been technically designated a project of national importance yet, right?
So how much more then is it going to take for the federal government to invest in the expansion of the Port of Churchill?
Yeah, we've got 3 or 4 studies on the go with them right now. Each one of those is going to build the case. But I think there's something that we're working on with the federal government behind the scenes that hopefully we'll be able to announce later this year that I think will really make the Churchill opportunity lock into focus for everybody. Because really, when we get our Western Canadian goods to market, whether it's agriculture, mining, manufactured goods, or energy products, Western Canada has so much of Canada's economy. And if we can get that to Europe, to India, to other parts around the world, it just gives us that opportunity to Trump-proof our economy and create more opportunity for everybody here.
Finally, I want to ask you here.
We're covering everything today. All right.
We're going to try and get through everything. The Prime Minister continues his visits overseas, China, India. I understand that all the premiers were invited to go to these other countries. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe has been to China and India. Manitoba, it sounds like you were invited. Why not take up the Prime Minister on those opportunities to create ties with those countries and maybe perhaps create some business here and some ties with some local businesses?
Well, I support the Prime Minister in doing these trade deals. And if there is a free trade agreement that gets signed in India later this year, like they're talking about, we'll go. The challenge with this trip is that the invite came about a week before they wanted us to get on a plane to India. And even then, the details were pretty hazy. So getting on a plane to go to the other side of the world for a photo op, not sure that's the best use of our time right now because we got affordability, public safety, healthcare, all these issues here at home. But if we get to a point where we could go overseas and bring back something tangible, like a free trade deal that says Manitoba business, Manitoba workers, you've got opportunity, then we'll definitely get on a plane and make that happen.
We covered everything today, Mr. Premier, so I really do appreciate
thanks so much for the time.
Joining us on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That is Premier Wab Kinew here for his monthly interview.